The morning I saw that pearl-white $85,000 Range Rover stretched across my driveway, I knew something in Cedar Ridge Meadows was about to change forever, and not in the way our HOA queen expected. My father's wheelchair-accessible van sat idling at the curb, horn blaring, while the medical transport driver kept glancing at his watch. Dialysis wasn't something you could reschedule for convenience, but Linda Prescott Hawthorne, self-appointed guardian of property values, was in no hurry. Through her picture window, I spotted her silhouette framed like some suburban monarch sipping her no-foam soy latte, watching our frustration with a smirk that could sour fresh cream. That smirk was about to cost her everything: her car, her McMansion, her cushy seat as HOA president, and the last threads of her marriage. And the best part? She'd have to beg me to take it away. I've always believed revenge tastes best when served legally and ice cold. This time, it would be freezer burn cold. I'm Daniel Moretti, 45, owner of Moretti Custom Builds. I build kitchens that survive earthquakes, decks that laugh at monsoon season, and fences stubborn enough to keep out both coyotes and nosy neighbors. 2 months ago, I inherited my grandmother's old ranch-style home here in Cedar Ridge Meadows. She was a legend, Evelina Moretti, the woman who fought the creation of this HOA back in the 90s, calling it taxation with extra steps and worse manners. My wife, Maria, is 8 months pregnant, but still teaching 5th graders because her words kids need stability more than I need swollen ankles. My dad, Frank Moretti, is a Vietnam vet and former steelworker, wheelchair-bound since a construction accident reopened old war injuries. He built half this county with his bare hands. All he needed now was a ramp so he could get in and out of the house without risking another injury. Enter Linda Prescott Hawthorne, 5 feet of coral cardigan fury. HOA president for the past 8 years, real estate agent with the moral compass of a raccoon in a jewelry store. The first time we met was day 3 after moving in. Diesel fumes from our moving truck still hung in the air when she strutted across my driveway in $900 heels. iPad tucked under her arm like a weapon. That structure needs architectural approval, she announced, pointing one manicured talon at Dad's temporary wheelchair ramp as if it were a meth lab. It's temporary, I explained. Dad needs the committee meets in 6 to 8 weeks, she said with the kind of smile sharks give before they bite. I'm sure he can manage until then. That night, Dad tried the stairs. I found him halfway up, knuckles white, legs trembling. The next morning at 7 a.m., I rebuilt the ramp with every power tool I owned screaming at once. By 7:15, a 5-hazer fine was taped to my door, still warm from Linda's printer, smelling faintly of entitlement and toner. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? I asked because if you've got an HOA like ours, you're going to want to hear every word of what comes next. Linda didn't just stumble into my life, she targeted it. Like she'd sniffed out that I wasn't the kind of man to roll over when confronted by a clipboard and pastel sweater set. Within the week, she'd started her little campaign. It began with a friendly email. Please remember, Cedar Ridge prohibits the overnight parking of commercial vehicles visible from the street. Now, I've got a big work truck necessary for hauling lumber, tools, and the occasional antique door, but I also have a garage full of my dad's medical gear and Maria's carefully stockpiled baby supplies. In other words, no room. Then, one glorious Tuesday morning, Linda upgraded from email harassment to a personal appearance. I was loading my truck for a kitchen remodel when her perfume hit me, Chanel No. 5, mixed with whatever smell money gets when it goes bad. She stood there like she'd caught me pouring toxic waste into the storm drain. Daniel, she cooed, we need to discuss your commercial vehicle situation. The way she said it made it sound like my truck was carrying nuclear waste. I asked, why is it only a problem now? Oh, we had an emergency HOA meeting while you were out working, she said sweetly. All commercial vehicles must be screened from view within 30 days. $100 daily fines otherwise. Funny thing, 2 streets over sat 3 trucks belonging to Hawthorne Construction owned by her husband. Charles parked like rolling billboards. No tarps, no fines. That's when my dad, watching from the porch, muttered, "Boy, you're in a sniper's scope, and she's picking her shots." He wasn't wrong. A week later, I had my answer. The Hawthorns had been scooping up city contracts I'd been bidding on for months. Every time I lost a bid, Linda's husband's crew got the job. That emergency vehicle rule a neat little way to chip away at my reputation and bank account simultaneously. But Grandma Evelina didn't raise a fool. I started my own emergency operation documenting every Hawthorne violation. Date-stamped photos, GPS coordinates, even a video of Charles's crew parking in the fire lane while unloading scaffolding. What Linda didn't realize was that the war she'd started was going to end in the most public, humiliating way possible, and I'd never have to break a single law to do it. By week 3 in Cedar Ridge Meadows, I'd learned that Linda didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them. She was like one of those playground bullies who knew exactly how far to push before the teacher noticed, except in this case. She was the teacher, the principal, and the hall monitor rolled into one. Her Range Rover might as well have had rules for the airbrush down the side, and she loved her vantage point. From the second-story window of her 6,500-square-foot McMansion white stucco, faux Greek columns, and all the charm of a Vegas casino bathroom, she could monitor my driveway, my work truck, my mailbox, and probably what brand of coffee we brewed. I used to think the worst kind of neighbor was the one who didn't mow their lawn. Now I knew better. The worst is the one who mows yours without asking, then fines you for not trimming it to their specifications. The real turning point came on a Monday morning at exactly 5:47 a.m. Dad's dialysis transport was scheduled for 6:15. I had a big client meeting across town at 7, and there it was, Linda's Range Rover, parked diagonally across my driveway like she was recreating a scene from the Fast and the Furious HOA drift. I figured maybe she'd just run inside for a minute, but no. She was over at her friend Marjorie's, coffee cup in hand, pretending to listen to a story about a leaky faucet. Marjorie's house was as dark as a cave because she'd been in Florida for the last 3 weeks. I called the non-emergency police line. The officer arrived at 6:10. And wouldn't you know it, Linda suddenly materialized, hand to her chest. "Oh, Daniel, I had no idea you needed to leave." "Yeah, sure. And coyotes don't like chicken." Tuesday, she blocked my concrete delivery. I had to pay $500 in restocking fees. Wednesday, she parked across the driveway just long enough to delay Dad's medical van. 38 minutes of honking, during which she was supposedly in an urgent HOA meeting. Thursday was the worst. Maria, 9 months pregnant, was stuck in the car behind Linda's Range Rover during a bout of false labor contractions. And here's where it clicked. Linda wasn't just guessing when to block us, she knew when we had important appointments, which meant one thing: she was reading our mail. Now, if you're not familiar with UE law, let me tell you, mail theft isn't just a HOA violation. It's a federal felony. I'd read about this exact tactic on a legal blog. If you could prove someone was intercepting mail, the postal inspectors would come running like it was Christmas morning. So, I set a trap. Step 1 order, a $12 fake medical appointment letter from a novelty site, made to look legit, Johnson Medical Group, big red important stamp, sealed envelope. Step 2, install a hidden camera in a solar landscape light aimed at the mailbox. Step 3, place the bait. Monday morning, 6:02 a.m. There she was, Linda Prescott Hawthorne, in a $300 yoga outfit, flipping through my mail like she was picking chocolates from a box. The fake appointment letter went straight into her designer tote. Gotcha. That same day, I slid a magnetic GPS tracker under the Range Rover's rear bumper while she was distracted yelling at the Patel kids about their unauthorized chalk art. Within a week, the tracker showed a greatest hits tour of illegal parking handicapped spots without a placard, blocking fire hydrants, expired registration. And here's the kicker: I learned her license had been suspended after a DUI the year before. Translation: every fine she'd issued me while driving illegally was legally worthless. I didn't realize it at the time, but my case against Linda was about to get a major upgrade. Because just as I was savoring the thought of dropping all this on her at the next HOA meeting, my neighbor, Evelyn Grant, the neighborhood's sweet old cookie lady, flagged me down in the driveway. She pressed a worn manila envelope into my hands. "Your grandmother knew this day would come," she said. Open it tonight. Inside was the HOA's original founding paperwork, complete with a grandfather clause from 1994 stating that all pre-existing uses of a property were exempt from new rules, which meant my work truck protected permanently, Linda's fines, paperwork for the shredder. But that was just the warm-up, because tucked into those same documents was a plat map showing something I still can't believe Linda didn't notice. Her precious Range Rover wasn't parked on her property. It was sitting 6 feet into HOA common area. I could already hear the chains on the tow truck, and for the first time since we moved in, I slept like a man who knew the Queen's crown was about to roll right off her head. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a man who had just been handed the combination to the enemy's safe. Linda's Range Rover sitting on HOA property was the kind of legal gold nugget you dream about in neighbor wars. It wasn't just a foot over the line. It was 6 whole feet. Now, under Nevada state law and the Cedar Ridge Meadows bylaws, Linda herself had drafted any vehicle illegally parked on HOA property that met certain conditions could be immediately towed. And guess what? Her registration was expired. Her license was suspended. And when she chose her Galanite Grand entrance spot, she'd pick a fire lane. She always did. We'd have every legal reason to hook that SUV and roll it away in full view of the neighborhood. I called my oldest friend, Roberto Diaz, who owns Diaz Recovery and Towing, the most respected tow company in Clark County. "Danny," he said, laughing the moment I explained, "you're telling me the same lady who called my truck an eyesore at a city meeting is parked illegally every single day. That's not just justice, that's dessert after justice. We made a plan that was cleaner than a hospital kitchen, cameras rolling, paperwork perfect, every move, letter of the law legal. This isn't revenge." I told him, "This is compliance. Compliance that's gonna feel real good." Roberto grinned. Of course, before the big night, Linda wasn't going to just sit still. 3 days later, I found my work truck up on blocks, 4 tires slashed like a scene from a mob movie. My security system had been vandalized to spray paint over 3 cameras, but Linda didn't know about the 4th, hidden inside an old birdhouse Maria made back in middle school. That birdhouse footage crystal clear. Her French manicure was practically glowing under the streetlights as she gripped the knife. Dad looked at the video, shook his head, and said, "She's desperate. When cornered, rats always bite." The same week, 5 of my clients canceled contracts totaling over $200,000 because of an anonymous blog claiming Moretti Custom Builds had safety violations and legal troubles. Guess where the blog was hosted? The HOA's own server. The Johnsons. My tech-savvy neighbors. Traced the IP address to the HOA meeting room. During hours when Linda was present, she was literally defaming me on official HOA time, using HOA resources. That's wire fraud. And the FBI loves wire fraud almost as much as postal inspectors love mail theft. By now, the list of Linda's crimes could have doubled as a community college syllabus federal mail theft. Wire fraud, vandalism, selective rule enforcement, false reports to CPS and Adult Protective Services, financial embezzlement from HOA accounts. And thanks to Evelyn's neighborhood gossip pipeline, we also learned Linda owed the HOA over $50,000 in unpaid dues, claiming presidential exemption. That's when our war room was born. We converted my garage into mission control. Roberto supplied the coffee. Dr. Patel brought spreadsheets of HOA finances. The Johnsons set up a private cloud server labeled Linda Leaks. And Evelyn, our geriatric double agent, fed us intel while pretending to bring Linda zucchini bread. We had 12 households fully on board by the end of the week. By the second week, 22. Every one of them had a Linda story harassment, bogus fines, racial or cultural slurs. The pattern was as clear as it was ugly. She targeted veterans, minorities, and anyone who didn't bow to her. The final piece clicked into place when Dr. Patel projected a chart of HOA transactions onto my garage wall. She skimmed over $250,000 in 8 years, he said. Vegas trips filed as board retreats, wine purchases listed as meeting refreshments, monthly Range Rover payments categorized as community vehicle maintenance. It was enough to send her to prison, but we didn't just want her gone, we wanted her gone publicly. And that's when the gala became our battlefield. Every year, Linda's HOA gala was her coronation, a chance to parade herself in front of real estate clients, pour overpriced Chardonnay, and make speeches about protecting home values. This year, it was going to be her public execution. We had the cameras. We had the news crews tipped off. We had Roberto's tow truck idling just 5 minutes away. And Linda had no idea that her own rules, her own arrogance, and her own illegal driveway were about to be the noose she tied for herself. 3 nights before the gala, our war room was buzzing like a beehive on espresso. Dad sat at the head of the folding table, his VA buddies on either side, all of them in matching HOA survivor t-shirts Maria had made. We went over the plan one last time. Phase 1, Doctor. Patel would present the forensic audit during the gala's special announcement slot projector, receipts, and all. Phase 2, Roberto's tow truck, staged out of sight, would roll in the moment Linda parked in a fire lane. Phase 3, cameras from every angle, calm legal compliance, zero emotion on our side. Phase 4, let Linda detonate on her own. Everything we do is by the book. I reminded them, no yelling, no shoving, no giving her away to spin this. Dad grinned. Let her spin, she'll just wrap the rope tighter. Then Linda tried her Hail Mary. Thursday morning, Ethel, our other sweet old spy, called me, her voice tight. She's holding an emergency HOA meeting at noon. Wants to pass 3 new rules: no recording devices at HOA events, no towing without board approval, and no gatherings over 4 people on HOA property without written consent. Translation: she was trying to outlaw our entire plan in one swoop. I walked into the meeting room, which smelled faintly of Chardonnay and desperation. Linda sat at the head table, coral cardigan ironed to military precision, notes clutched in a hand that trembled just enough for me to notice. These measures are necessary to protect our community from organized harassment, she said, scanning the room full of homeowners glaring at her. Dr. Patel stood. Point of order. Madam President, Page 47, Section 3 of the bylaws requires 30 days notice for a vote on new rules. I'm invoking emergency powers for community safety, she shot back. What emergency? Ethel asked sweetly from the back. The gala, that's been on the calendar for months. The vote failed 4-0. Even her usual wine club allies weren't touching it. Gary Chen, our lawyer, waited for her to finish sputtering before saying, the gala is on HOA common property. Every dues-paying member has equal right to attend and record. Page 15, Section 8. You wrote it. Linda fled the meeting without a word. Friday morning, the last nail in her coffin arrived wrapped in a polo shirt and khakis. It was her husband, Charles Hawthorne. He stood at my door looking like a man who'd finally accepted that the iceberg wasn't moving. I'm done, he said, handing me a thumb drive. She's bankrupted us. That drive has proof embezzlement, fake receipts, notes about targeting neighbors, even recordings of her bragging at wine nights. There it was. 8 years of corruption gift-wrapped for the prosecution. One file stood out a spreadsheet ranking neighbors by risk to property value. Notes like too many Hispanics on Oak Street and veteran with PTSD unstable should be removed. She wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was a bigot with a badge. By Saturday evening, the stage was set. The Cedar Ridge Community Center sparkled with fairy lights, white-clothed tables, and enough wine to float a battleship. 3 local news crews mingled, ready for what they thought was a puff piece about neighborhood unity. At 7:43, the Range Rover appeared pearl white, polished within an inch of its life, gliding into the fire lane right in front of the entrance. Linda sat for 3 full minutes, fixing her lipstick, oblivious to the fact that 47 phone cameras were already rolling. She stepped out in a sequined dress that probably cost more than my truck's transmission, heels clicking like she was walking a runway, not a no parking zone. Inside, she worked the room with fake warmth, shaking hands, laughing too loud. At 8:15, Dr. Patel took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady. I present 8 years of systematic financial misconduct by our HOA president. The projector lit up with bank statements, receipts, Credit card charges for Vegas weekends labeled board retreats. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This is illegal!" Linda shouted, standing so fast, her wine glass toppled. Gary Chen's voice cut through. Page 73 of the bylaws. Any 5 members can demand an emergency review if fraud is suspected. We have 47 signatures. The room turned into a storm, cameras flashing, neighbors shouting, the news crews swiveling to capture every expression. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Roberto Showtime. Through the window, the red and blue flash of a tow truck's emergency lights washed over the room. The chariot of justice had arrived. Heads snapped toward the glass doors as Roberto's gleaming flatbed slid into the fire lane like it was rolling into a movie set. Its chrome rails glinted under the fairy lights strung across the community center. Hazard lights flashed a steady red and amber rhythm, washing over faces pressed to the glass. People whispered, some grinned, and a few residents actually cheered before realizing they should probably pretend to be shocked. Carlos Roberto's best driver, and a former Marine who could load a vehicle in his sleep, stepped down from the cab, clipboard in one hand, reflective safety vest catching the light. He moved with deliberate, unhurried precision. This wasn't a smash-and-grab tow. This was a surgical strike by the book, every step documented. Inside, Linda froze mid-sputter at Dr. Patel's presentation. Her eyes locked on the truck outside, then on the Range Rover parked in the fire lane, and then on Carlos walking toward it with the calm assurance of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. "That's my car," she shrieked, her voice slicing through the buzz of conversation. Sequins on her dress shimmered like a warning beacon as she shoved through the crowd, nearly knocking over 2 women holding wine glasses. By the time she burst through the glass doors, Carlos had the wheel lift already positioned under her front tires. His movements were smooth, professional, every motion purposeful, as if rehearsed 100 times. "Ma'am," he said without looking up, his tone measured. "This vehicle is illegally parked in a designated fire lane on HOA common property. Registration expired, license suspended, per Section 47C of your HOA bylaws and Nevada Revised Statute 484C. 1-10. It is subject to immediate impound." Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The red splotch rising from her neck spread across her face. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president," she barked, her voice cracking on the last word. Carlos barely shrugged. "That's nice," he replied, tightening the straps on the wheel lift without breaking eye contact for more than a second. The crowd followed her out, the sound of footsteps on concrete mingling with the whir of cameras starting to roll. Dozens of cell phones were up, some owners already streaming to Facebook Live. When Linda grabbed Carlos's forearm, mistake number 1, the cameras caught every frame. Assault on an on-duty service operator. When she kicked the tow truck's rear tire, mistake number 2, the hollow thud was met with murmurs from the crowd. Property damage, also on film. And then came mistake number 3, the one that would follow her further than any HOA scandal could. "You saw spics, don't know who you're messing with." The slur hit the air like a gut punch. Gasps erupted. A few people stepped back. Others leaned forward with phones to ensure they caught her face in the same shot as the words. 300 people heard it. 3 local news crews recorded it. And right there, the black reporter from Channel 7 turned to her cameraman and said loud enough for the microphones, "Tell me you got that." The cameraman just nodded, zooming in for a close-up of Linda's expression as the reality of what she'd said began to register. Her jaw tightened. Too late. The internet already had her. And, just when I thought the timing couldn't possibly be better, fate threw us a perfect assist. A white government sedan pulled into the driveway, stopping behind the tow truck. Official plates gleamed under the overhead lights. Out stepped a sheriff's deputy, broad-shouldered, hat low, and a man in a dark suit flipping open a leather badge case. The deputy's voice carried over the murmur of the crowd. "Linda Prescott Hawthorne, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of federal mail theft, wire fraud, and making false reports to Child Protective Services." The collective gasp from the crowd was so loud it could have blown the fairy lights off the building. For half a heartbeat, Linda stood frozen. Then instinct, or maybe sheer arrogance, kicked in, and she bolted. In those $800 heels, She made it exactly 4 steps before catching a toe on the curb and face-planting into the decorative rosemary bushes she'd once fined the Johnsons for trimming incorrectly. The deputy helped her up, brushing bits of rosemary from her sequins as he began the Miranda rights. Every word was caught in crisp, high-definition video on at least 20 phones and 3 professional news cameras. That's when the moment turned from public shaming to pure theatrical perfection. From the crowd stepped Charles Hawthorne, Linda's husband, his tie slightly loosened, his face wearing the weary resignation of a man who had finally accepted that the iceberg wasn't moving. He held a manila envelope, thick with papers. His voice was steady, but there was something almost gleeful beneath it. "Linda," he said, loud enough for the microphones. "You're being served. Divorce papers. I'm keeping the house. Check the prenup clause under criminal convictions. You made sure to sign it yourself." A ripple of gasps, then scattered applause. Even some of Linda's former allies didn't bother to hide their smirks. Carlos secured the last strap on the Range Rover. The flatbed's hydraulics whined as it began to lift, the SUV's pearl white paint glowing under the streetlights. It was the kind of sound that could be ugly or beautiful depending on whose side you were on. For me, it was a symphony. Linda's head jerked toward me as the deputy guided her to the patrol car. Mascara had started its descent in thick, black rivers. "You did this. Daniel, you destroyed everything," she shouted, voice breaking on the last word. I stepped forward, Dad rolling his chair beside me. I'd been waiting months for this line, polishing it like a jewel. "No, Linda," I said evenly. "You did this. We just made sure everyone saw it." The crowd erupted in applause, loud, sustained, cathartic. Some people even whistled. Carlos climbed back into the tow truck's cab. Roberto, leaning on the passenger side door, gave me a slow nod that said, "Mission accomplished." The Range Rover's taillights blinked as it disappeared down the street, every eye watching it go. Inside, the community center was already buzzing. The news crews had shifted gears entirely. This wasn't a neighborhood gala story anymore. It was an on-the-spot exposé. Headlines were already forming in reporters' heads. HOA president arrested at gala after towing incident uncovers years of corruption. Gary Chen gathered our core group in a corner, his tone low but satisfied. Tonight wasn't just about the tow or the arrest. He said, it was about taking back your neighborhood, your peace, and your dignity. Looking around at the mix of relief and disbelief on my neighbors' faces, I realized he was right. We'd won the battle right there in the fire lane. But Linda's fall, that was only just beginning. Linda's arrest didn't end the night it supercharged it. As the patrol car pulled away, the gala transformed into something halfway between a town hall and a street festival. The tension that had gripped Cedar Ridge Meadows for years was bleeding out right there on the pavement. People who'd barely spoken to each other before were swapping stories over plastic cups of Chardonnay, voices shaking with adrenaline and relief. Dr. Patel, still in his suit from the presentation, stood in the center of a circle of residents, replaying the financial slides on a tablet for those who'd been too busy watching the tow truck to catch every detail. $250,000, all traceable. He kept repeating, every cent of it stolen from us. Evelyn Grant, our stealthy zucchini-bred spy, was in full social butterfly mode, telling anyone within earshot, "Oh, I told Daniel weeks ago we'd get her. You just have to let a bully talk long enough, and she'll give you the rope." The news crews were feasting. Cameras darted between small clusters of neighbors, catching quotes that ranged from, "She fined me for my holiday lights," to, "She called the cops because my husband grilled ribs in the driveway." One microphone found Dad. He straightened in his chair, Purple Heart gleaming on his jacket, and said, "She thought she could push around a disabled vet and a pregnant woman. She forgot that Marines aren't the only ones who know how to fight smart." The crowd ate it up. Inside the community center, Gary Chen set up at the podium like it was a courtroom. "Folks," he said, "there's more business to handle tonight. We have an HOA presidency to fill, and under our bylaws, any member can call for a vote if the current president is unable to fulfill their duties. I'd say wearing handcuffs qualifies." Laughter rolled through the room, but it was the determined kind, the laugh of people who just realized they had real power. Gary looked around. Nominations. Evelyn's name came up immediately, followed by a chorus of seconds so loud the microphone popped. She raised her hands, shaking her head. "I'll do it if you all promise to keep showing up and speaking up. I'm not here to be queen. I'm here to make sure there's never another Linda." The vote was unanimous. Evelyn's first motion as president was to review and reverse all fines issued in the past 8 years pending investigation. "Effective immediately," she added, to roaring applause. The Patels cried. The Johnsons hugged each other. Even the quiet Korean couple, who'd kept their heads down for years, came forward to shake Evelyn's hand. Gary caught my eye and leaned in. "That right there. That's how you dismantle a petty regime. Not just with a tow truck, but with a community that's done being scared." I stepped outside for some air, the desert night cooler than I expected. Roberto was leaning against the tow truck, Range Rover already chained down and paperwork filed. He held up his phone. Comments were pouring in on a live stream he'd posted of the tow, already at 300,000 views. "You're going viral, hermano," he said with a grin. "By morning, every HOA tyrant in America's gonna know your name." I couldn't help but smile. Good. Let 'em be nervous. Somewhere across town, Linda was being processed. Fingerprints taken, her sequined dress replaced with county-issued clothing. Here in Cedar Ridge, the rest of us were finally breathing free. But as satisfying as that night was, I knew it wasn't the end, and the legal hammer hadn't even fallen yet, and when it did, it was going to land hard. We had the thumb drive from Charles. We had the audit. We had video evidence of her crimes and her slurs. And we had a neighborhood full of witnesses willing to testify. The Range Rover was just the start. Linda's empire wasn't crumbling. It had already fallen. The next 72 hours moved faster than I could have scripted. By Monday morning, the Linda Prescott Hawthorne scandal had broken out of local news and into national headlines. Clips of her shouting slurs, kicking the tow truck, and being led away in handcuffs played on morning shows between weather updates and political segments. #HOA Queen. Down was trending on Twitter by noon. The Range Rover tow video crossed 1.2 million views in a single day. Roberto's flatbed had become a meme. Someone even photoshopped it towing the Death Star. But the real hit came from the legal side. The federal prosecutor assigned to the case, an efficient, no-nonsense woman named Dana Curtis, held a press conference flanked by the sheriff and the postal inspector. The charges include federal mail theft, wire fraud, falsifying government reports, and civil rights violations. She said, "The defendant is accused of targeting residents based on race, veteran status, and other protected classes. This office takes such cases extremely seriously." The words civil rights violations rang through the air like a church bell. Those weren't HOA slap-on-the-wrist fines. Those were career-ending prison sentencing charges. In Cedar Ridge Meadows, life changed almost overnight. Evelyn wasted no time turning promises into action. She called an emergency town hall, the first one the neighborhood had seen in years, where residents weren't afraid to speak. "We're going to operate on radical transparency," she told us. "Every expense, every bylaw vote, every violation posted online for everyone to see. No more hidden agendas, no more secret meetings." The motion to erase all questionable fines from the past 8 years passed unanimously. It was like watching a storm lift off the neighborhood. People were smiling, hugging, even making plans to repaint houses and plant gardens without the fear of a notice showing up in their mailbox. The Korean family announced they were finally installing their long-delayed koi pond. The Patels planned a Diwali celebration open to everyone. Dad started drawing up plans for a weekly veterans breakfast at the community center. Maria and I could finally focus on her pregnancy without checking over our shoulders. Her blood pressure went down. She started laughing again. Real laughter, not the tired half smiles she'd worn for months. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, Dad rolled out holding baby name lists. "If it's a girl," he said, "you ought to name her Gloria, for the glory of watching that woman's Range Rover disappear." We didn't commit right away, but I'll admit it stuck in my head. The week after the gala, Charles stopped by again. Without Linda, he looked 10 years younger. "Thought you'd want this." he said, handing me a certified letter. Inside was a notarized statement detailing Linda's years of harassment, theft, and fraud, complete with dates, amounts, and accomplices. The DA's office has a copy. He added, "They say this should lock her in for a plea deal." He paused, then smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. "By the way, I hear you do kitchen remodels. I'm thinking of starting fresh." I shook his hand. "Widow, you've got my number." By month's end, Linda was in county lockup awaiting federal transfer. She'd pled guilty to multiple counts to avoid a long trial, 2 years in federal prison, 3 years probation, $300,000 in restitution, and she was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board, nonprofit, or community organization. It was, as Dad put it, the legal version of taking away Voldemort's wand. And then came the icing on the cake. One morning, a letter arrived from an unfamiliar name, Isabel Prescott, Linda's daughter. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you. My mother's arrest freed our family from her control. I'm in law school now, studying housing discrimination law. The HOA scholarship you started helped pay my tuition." Ironic. Right, but fitting. "You gave me my life back." I read it twice, then handed it to Maria, who smiled and said, "Looks like Gloria's got another role model." Looking back, I realized something. The Range Rover tow was satisfying. Sure, watching her get arrested was better, but the real victory wasn't Linda losing it, was all of us winning. Cedar Ridge Meadows wasn't just free of a tyrant. We were finally a community. 6 months after the gala, Cedar Ridge Meadows barely resembled the tight-lipped, tension-filled neighborhood we'd moved into. The air was different, lighter somehow. Driveways were no longer surveillance zones, just places where kids left scooters and neighbors stopped to chat. The only violations being discussed now were about who brought the wrong dip to the Friday potluck. Under Evelyn's leadership, the HOA had transformed from a weapon into what it was always supposed to be, a service. She held monthly open meetings, streamed them online for anyone who couldn't attend, and made sure every dollar spent was posted on a public spreadsheet. And for the first time in years, residents were actually using the community center for community. The Patels hosted their Diwali festival there, stringing lights across the courtyard and handing out sweets to every curious neighbor who wandered by. The Korean family turned their new koi pond into a neighborhood attraction, even inviting the local elementary school for field trips. Dad's veteran breakfast drew in not just former service members, but also folks who'd been too nervous to talk to anyone before. Maria gave birth to our daughter 2 weeks after Linda was transferred to federal custody. We named her Gloria. The day we brought her home, Dad insisted on holding her in his lap out on the porch. "She's the proof," he said, eyes misting. "Proof that we didn't just fight for ourselves, we fought so she'd grow up knowing her home is her castle." Maria laughed. "And so she'll know her grandpa was part of a neighborhood rebellion." My business exploded in the best possible way. Turns out being the contractor who stood up to a corrupt HOA president was better marketing than any billboard. Clients were calling from across the state, some even saying, "I saw the tow video and knew you were my kind of builder. I had to hire 2 new crews just to keep up." Roberto was busier too. His tow yard became a minor tourist attraction. People wanted pictures with the flatbed that hauled away the Queen's car. He even sold t-shirts with a silhouette of the Range Rover mid-lift. Evelyn, being Evelyn, turned part of the recovered HOA funds into something lasting. The Evelina Moretti Memorial Scholarship, named after my grandmother, for students pursuing careers in law, community organizing, or civil rights. That way, she said, we're training the next generation to spot and stop the next Linda before she starts. And because the universe has a sense of humor, we occasionally heard updates about Linda. After prison, she was spotted working at a mall kiosk selling phone cases. According to a mutual acquaintance, she once tried to lecture a customer about unapproved accessories and nearly got slapped. Dad's reaction, guess she found a new way to hand out pointless fines. The best part, our story sparked change beyond Cedar Ridge. A state legislator who lived 2 streets over pushed through a bill nicknamed Linda's Law, requiring HOA financial transparency, public access to bylaws, and strict limits on presidential powers. When they invited me to testify at the state capitol, I told the committee exactly what I'd told the crowd at the gala. Your home is your castle, but knowledge is your sword and shield. The bill passed 97-3. A year after the gala, we held the first annual Freedom from Tyranny Festival. Bounce houses lined the park. The smell of barbecue replaced the stench of fear, and the main stage featured Dad telling war stories, both Vietnam and HOA. Evelyn wore a sash that said "President for Life, just kidding." Gloria got her first taste of cotton candy, and Roberto parked his tow truck front and center with a sign, "Photos 5 all proceeds to Veterans Fund." By mid-afternoon, he'd raised $3,000. As the sun dipped low, I stood with Maria and Gloria, looking out at a neighborhood laughing together, talking without checking for a clipboard in the shadows. Dad rolled up beside us. Gloria perched on his lap, both wearing matching HOA Survivor t-shirts. "You know," he said, "your grandmother would have loved this." And I believed him, because Evelina always said the best revenge against bullies wasn't destroying them, it was building something better in the space they used to occupy. We had done exactly that, and we weren't the same people Linda thought she could intimidate. We were something stronger: neighbors, friends, a community that knew its worth. And if any future HOA tyrant came knocking, well, we still had Roberto's number. After that first Freedom from Tyranny Festival, life in Cedar Ridge Meadows settled into something I didn't think was possible when we first moved in peaceful. The HOA meetings Evelyn chaired felt almost boring, and that was the best thing about them. No gavel slamming, no icy glares from the front table, no residents holding their breath waiting to be singled out. We talked about potholes, landscaping budgets, and whether to replace the community center chairs, actual neighborhood issues. It was funny people used to avoid each other for fear of getting reported. Now, I'd get stopped 3 times on my way to the mailbox just to catch up. We had block parties without anyone measuring fence heights or checking cooler contents. The scholarship fund Evelyn launched in Grandma Evelina's name took off. Donations poured in, not just from our neighborhood, but from people across the state who'd heard our story. The first recipient was a soft-spoken college sophomore named Mateo, whose parents had nearly lost their home to a predatory HOA in another county. He was studying community law and planned to specialize in property rights. When he came to thank us, he said, "I want to be the lawyer that stops people like Linda before they ruin lives." That's when it hit me. This thing we'd started wasn't just fixing our neighborhood. It was sending ripples way beyond it. Maria and I had our hands full with Gloria, but she became a kind of unofficial mascot for the new Cedar Ridge. At meetings, she'd toddle between chairs, charming even the crankiest residents. Dad claimed she was training early for public office. One evening, after putting her to bed, Maria sat with me on the porch and said, "Do you ever think about how close we came to just giving up? If we'd sold the house, left the HOA, we never would have built this." I thought about the months of stress, the fines, the nights we lay awake listening for trouble, and how easily we could have walked away. "Yeah," I said, "but walking away doesn't change the problem. Standing our ground did." Even Roberto got in on the new neighborhood culture. He started sponsoring an annual Tau for Tots holiday fundraiser, towing volunteer donor cars around the block while kids tossed candy from the flatbeds. Parents donated to the Veterans Fund in exchange for their car being arrested. It was ridiculous, fun, and raised thousands. We weren't just free from Linda, we'd turned the whole place into something worth protecting. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Dana Curtis, the federal prosecutor. "Daniel," she said, "I thought you'd like to know Linda's just filed to serve her sentence in a minimum security facility in Arizona. The court approved it. She'll be there for the next 2 years." I pictured her trading sequined gowns for khaki jumpsuits and thought, poetic enough. She's also been ordered to attend cultural sensitivity and anti-discrimination training as part of her probation, Dana added, and I couldn't help but laugh. Linda had once told me, in her perfect clipped tone, "Some people just don't belong in this neighborhood." She was right about one thing. Turns out, she wasn't one of them. It's been 2 full years since that night at the gala, and Linda Prescott Hawthorne is just a memory now, one that occasionally gets resurrected for a laugh at block parties or to scare new board members straight. She served her time in Arizona, got out last spring, and, from what I hear, moved to a small town in New Mexico where nobody knows her name or her past. I doubt it'll stay that way for long. People like Linda don't change their stripes. They just move their parade to another street. But here, Cedar Ridge Meadows has flourished. The HOA is no longer a weapon. Evelyn stepped down last month, passing the presidency to Dr. Patel, who runs the board like a clean, well-oiled machine. Our neighborhood gatherings have turned into something we look forward to, not dread. We've got a community garden now, movie nights in the park, and a porch light pact where everyone keeps theirs on for evening walks. Maria and I still live in Grandma Evelina's house. We remodeled the kitchen last year, added a deck, and put in a swing for Gloria, who's now a bold, opinionated toddler with a mischievous grin. She doesn't remember the bad days, and I'm grateful for that. Dad still runs his veteran breakfast group, and every time he flips a pancake, someone will eventually bring up the toe and everyone laughs all over again. He calls it the day the neighborhood remembered who really owned it. Sometimes I think about how close we came to giving up, to selling and walking away. That would have been easier in the short term, but we'd have left the problem for someone else. Instead, we stood our ground, and the ripple effects went further than I ever imagined: scholarships, legislation, and a community that knows its own power. So, to anyone watching this who's in the middle of their own HOA nightmare, here's the truth. Your home is your castle. Your bylaws are your armor. And your neighbors, no matter how divided they seem, can be your army if you find the courage to stand together. Every rule a bully uses to control you can be turned into the chain that drags them out of power. Every dirty trick they pull is another piece of evidence. And when you finally take your stand, do it in the open, do it legally, and do it with witnesses. Because the best revenge isn't just seeing them fall, it's knowing you built something better in the space they used to occupy. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. Got a horror story of your own? Drop it in the comments. The worst one will be featured in next week's episode, and trust me, you won't believe how that one ends. And remember, bullies write their own downfall. All you have to do is make sure everyone sees it.